just made them in little balls. Again, this is a quick, like a use-up meal, really. I don't think it's much quicker than pasta, to be fair. It takes about 8 or 9 minutes to cook. So I'm going to try and get this done, the majority of it, in one pan, apart from obviously I'm going to boil my pasta in that one. So I'm just going to heat up oil. So we're going to cook the meatballs through in the oven, but I'm going to start them off in the pan. I want to get colour on the meatballs. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the Maillard reaction. Is that a common term? So basically, when you get colour on meat, believe it or not, you do actually have natural sugars that reside within proteins. And that kind of, the Maillard reaction is the caramelisation of those sugars. And it kind of gives it extra flavour, right? That's what, you know, when you get your roast meat or your... That's the chemistry. I always like to talk about it. So, fairly hot pan. What I want to do is get a bit of colour on these. But all that flavour that's going to come out of that is going to stay in that pan. I'm going to make my sauce in there, alright? The main reason I'm going to finish cooking my meatballs in the oven is they're going to release quite a lot of fat. I don't necessarily want all that fat in my sauce. A bit of fat's good, like I explained earlier on. Like the process of fats is actually really important for the way that your taste receptors pick up flavours, alright? But we don't want it swimming in fat. So my water, you probably get to, I don't know, most of you have probably been taught at some point to put oil in your water when you cook pasta. It's a fallacy, don't do it, you don't need to, alright? What's more important is that you have loads of water. You need plenty of room for that pasta to move, and you must season it as well, alright? Like JJ was saying and Tony was saying earlier on, anything like rice or pasta absorbs whatever you put into it. So if you give it a bit of flavour, give it a bit of salt, it's going to help the seasoning of your dish. So I want plenty of colour on these. You can see they're starting to colour up nicely. And all that flame, while they're kind of cooking, I'm going to get my stuff out. So I'm going to use a shallot. So shallot's obviously a bit more mild than an onion. And I'm going to cut it quite fine. This is going to be a really quick sauce. Like the sauce itself is going to take literally 5-6 minutes to make. So I want a small onion that's going to cook quickly. So I'm just going to slice that nice and thin.
The trick is that you have your one finger in front and cut, so the knife doesn't get to the side of your finger.
It's muscle memory as well, you know, like I can cut with my eyes shut now. You know, you can kind of... No, I wouldn't recommend it, but once you've been doing it for a while, you just get muscle memory, like you just get used to it. So again, while that's colouring up, bit of chilli, like a bit of heat in there, you know. Thanks, Jay. I don't want to set any fire alarms off while I'm in here. So I'm going to put a bit of chilli in there as well. Again, there's another bit of a myth with chilies, alright? They'll tell you that the heat is in the seeds. That is also wrong. Where the seeds attach to the inside, you have like that white membrane. That's where the heat comes from, okay? Inadvertently, when you're taking the seeds out of your chili, you're likely going to scrape that out. So that is where the majority of your heat sits, alright? These chilies they're not very hot, but they've got loads of flavour. For me, it's not always just about heat. There's no point in having heat without flavour. So now I've got plenty of colour on there. Oh, and I've dropped one. I'm just going to pop that to one side when I finish off. So I'm going to put these in the hot oven. Again, about 180, 200. Yeah, you do, yeah.
Asbestos.
So if I was doing this in the restaurant, I would blanch this tomato. So basically what we do is put it in boiling water for 10-15 seconds in the cold water, just remove that skin. But as we're making this quickly, I'm literally just going to dice this tomato up roughly. I love fresh tomato, rather than using tin tomatoes. Tin tomatoes are okay, but I think you just lose a lot of flavour. Like, I grow my own tomatoes at home. I'm a big fan of like heirloom varieties. And I think last year I grew 10 different varieties of tomatoes. I've got somewhat of an obsession with them. So we're going to do the same with this one, just remove the stalk, then just dice them up roughly. And I'm also going to put garlic in this as well. So garlic does burn if you overheat it, so I'm not going to put it in at the start. It doesn't taste very pleasant when you burn it, or some things do. Put the tons in there. So what I'm going to do is just going to crush this with the back of my knife. Really crush it down and then run the knife through it. And then I'm going to put a little bit of salt on it. And I'm going to make it into a paste. I don't want bits of garlic in my sauce, I find that they can be a bit insipid. So the salt almost acts like sandpaper. So just using the back of my knife. You see that it's taken me seconds and I've got a nice garlic paste there, alright? And it also helps with the seasoning as well.
Tricks of the trade.
And right, back on the heat. So if you've got enough fat left in your pan, don't worry about putting any oil in, but I'm going to put a little bit in just to get it going again. So first thing that's going to go in is going to be my onions and shallots. These will actually kind of take all the stuff that's sort of caramelised and stuck to the bottom of the pan. This is going to release it, and we're going to get that into our sauce, all flavour.
What type of oil are you using?
Oh, this is just olive oil, but a mild olive oil. Do not use virgin olive oil for frying because it's one, a waste of money, and two, basically the particles in the oil have different heat tolerances. In virgin olive oil, it will actually start to taint if you get it too hot. It won't taste very nice.
This is actually called pumice oil. So it's the very last squeeze. And they add some vegetable to it just to bulk it out really. That's the very, very last squeeze. You get the flavour, but just a little bit milder. Because your extra virgin is going to be your strongest and then your virgin is second.
I'm using a wooden spoon so I don't scrape the metal on the bottom of my pan, because I want to get all this stuff off the bottom. That's all my flavour in there. I'm actually going to put a little bit more oil in there. So I'm just going to start to sweat them off, contrary to what Tony did with his risotto, because obviously it's, you know, a white thing. You don't want burnt bits of onion in there, it's going to affect the flavour. Whereas I'm going to caramelise this onion just slightly, okay, just before I turn the heat down, and then I'm going to add my tomatoes and my garlic. And like I said before, I'm adding my garlic in at that point, because if I get it in a hot pan, it's going to burn and it's going to taste acrid. It goes really bitter. So that goes in there with my tomatoes. The water is going to start releasing from my tomatoes. All right.
This pasta is great to use up for ingredients as well. You add anything you want in them. It's a great money saver.
To add a little bit of depth to the sauce as well, I'm going to put a little bit of tomato paste. I love tomato paste. It's really good for if you're making sauces, gravies at home. Concentrated flavour. It also helps to give it a little bit of thickness, like a little bit of body. But it's important that you cook it out. If you don't cook tomato paste out again, it can be a bit acrid. It's not.
So if you had some leftover vegetables, you can chuck it in?
Yeah, you can. You can put whatever you want in there. I mean, this time of year is great. You know, you've got the tail end of the asparagus season. You've got fresh peas coming up now, leafy greens, things like, you know, chard, and you literally can put. It's just, again, it's quick. You can do whatever you want.
Courgettes really well with this.
Yeah, delicious. Courgettes are really nice. A little bit of
Don't
lemon.
courgettes, you can't get rid of them. the more you cut, the more it grows.
You have to make sure I cook a lot with celery.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, slice it, because anything goes in,
And then I'm just going to put a little bit of stock in there.
celery is like marmite, you love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about fairly thick, goes with something like that.
Did you know celery is the only food that has a negative calorific value? It takes more energy for your body to process than it gives you in nutrition.
Yeah, I like that sort of pack.
The thing about celery, if you braise it, it actually sweetens.
Right.
If you cook it slowly in stock, absolutely beautiful.
The use of these, it gives a peppery flavour.
Exactly, yes.
Right, so that's going to tick over. My water, I'm going to get it right up to the boil. Like I said to you, what's most important is, don't worry about faffing putting oil in there, because it really, in my opinion, makes no difference. What's more important is you season it well, and you've got enough water in there.
Work out portion size.
70 grams a head generally. Wait, don't guess it with your hands. You can get quite cool tools now that you can. But another little trick that I do, if you get it into a thing and then you twist it up into a spiral, as you drop it into your pan, the ends don't stick together. All right. My wife does it when she cooks pasta. We end up with like all the ends are stuck together. It's like a feather duster. So if you just give it a little twist, it helps to keep the bottom from separating.
On portion control, your pasta spoons, you know, the base spoon with there's a hole in it. That's a portion.
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you, when I cook at home, I normally do double what you're meant to have, because I'm greedy. But again, like at home, I use cherry tomatoes for this. Just throw them in whole. You can blister them up a bit if you want to get a bit of colour. I'm hoping, with a bit of luck, that by the time that's cooked, that's ready, it's all together in a bowl done. All right, and it'd taken me literally 15 minutes to do that. But you don't have to have, you know, like we've used sausage meat that we've produced, but you can just get sausages, squeeze them out, cut them up, you know. If you want to make meatballs that way as well.
The way I tend to explain to the students why you don't put oil in the pan, oil and water don't mix. All the oil goes to the top, so it's actually got zero effect into the water itself. If you cook pasta and cool it and store it, that's when you need the oil to stop from sticking.
And I'm a big advocate of adding it. Like once you drain it, you can pop a little bit of olive oil in there because it's just flavour, you know, and it just helps it stop sticking together. I don't know if I've got a sieve.
There's some pommes in there as well if you want.
What's that, sorry, mate?
There's some pommes and cheese there as well if you want.
I want a bit of texture remaining in my tomatoes as well. I'm not going to cook them like to mush. I think that little bit of acidity you get from tomatoes when they're still is really nice as well. I've got a little bit of fresh basil. I'm going to put that in right at the end, right? Like the essential oils that are in basil really denature very quickly when you get them hot. So it's important that you put it in right at the end. Don't put it in at the start of the cooking process because it will change the flavour. You lose that freshness.
You put it in the pan rather than when you serve that.
Well, you can do either. Like if you want to just literally just chop up a little bit and put it on once you serve, but I will generally just throw it in last minute. I tend to leave it whole. I don't chop it. Basil bruises really easily. So if you just pull it, I mean the leaves are like spinach really. Once they cook, they kind of go a lot smaller anyway. And you just get all those essential oils coming out. And for me, that's what it's about. It's like releasing the flavour. So my pasta's cooking away nicely there.
Picking it off the sort of fruit, how quickly would you use it?
Straight away, to be honest with you. When I grow it at home, I haven't grown any this year, but I literally just pick it as I need it. No point in picking it beforehand. It doesn't last long anyway once you picked it. In supermarkets, they fill these bags with nitrogen, which stops them from oxidising, and you know. But as soon as you open that bag, it starts to suffer a little bit. You can see that sauce is now starting to get a bit of viscosity, so like it's starting to just reduce a little bit. If you're feeling a bit fruity, you can put a bit of wine in there if you want. You know, you can put, depends what you got hanging around, you know.
Masala, sherry, white wine,
bit of whatever.
it all works. I've often used port just to sweeten up when I'm using something that's quite spicy, because the spicy and the sweetness then balance itself out.
Got basil, I've never seen that.
Always, yes. Just to balance out either the acidity from the tomatoes or the spices from the chili.
There's a thing called a gastrique as well, so it's equal quantities of vinegar and sugar, and you can basically, that's what everyone uses as a trick. So your Heinz tomato ketchup, that kind of sour, sweet taste, is a gastrique, so it's equal, so if you like a tablespoon of each, boil it down, pop it in there. Personally, I love the acidity in tomatoes. I'm a tomato nut though, and I personally don't put sugar in. I think this is what I love about cooking. Okay, it's like everyone's different. There's no right or wrong. You know, it depends what you're trying to get out of it. Like I say, I love the acidity of fresh tomatoes. I like you get a little bite in your cheeks, and I think that's part of the appeal for me. But if I was serving this with something that maybe didn't suit, like if I was going to put white wine in there, I probably would sweeten it a little bit because it maybe get a bit too much acidity. Do you know what I mean?
If your tomatoes are really ripe, you don't need the sugar because they're quite sweet. If they're less ripe, then they're a little more acidic, then you balance it.
Definitely.
General rule of thumb is taste the tomato.
Yeah, that's it. Definitely. Yeah. So my pasta, what I'm looking for, you've heard of the term al dente, so it means to the tooth. So I want my pasta to be cooked, but I don't want it to be. Well, I wouldn't class it as undercooked, just cooked. Because again, it will just absorb water. You know, that's what pasta does. So it's nearly there. Like JJ mentioned, finishing your pasta in your sauce is a good way of getting a bit of extra flavour in there. So that is what I'm going to do. When I check my pasta, I'll give it a little pinch. Same way as I do my rice, so rather than putting it in your mouth, and I can actually see in the middle how much of that's not cooked. So I reckon that's about 2-3 minutes off.
Never throw it against the wall.
Yeah.
If it sticks, it is overcooked.
If it sticks, it's definitely overcooked, yeah. Most of my students, first year, they go, oh, I know how to tell cooked patty. Yeah, you throw it against the wall and it sticks. It's like, you throw that against the wall, it's over, and it sticks.
The only reason they do that is they have to clean it afterwards,
Yeah, it's ruined.
Exactly, yeah.
The trainings live on pasta.
Yeah.
What's the nutritional thing with pasta?
Well, it does contain, flour contains protein, not a lot, about 10 to 12%. Obviously, if you're making egg pasta, it contains, eggs are obviously good for you. It's got vitamins and minerals and obviously more protein. It's more a bulking agent. Obviously, slow release carbohydrates are good for, but the Mediterranean diet is the healthiest categorically in terms of health. They have they're the longest lived. They have the lowest cancer rate, so on and so. But they actually eat less protein and more carbohydrates, which is contrary to what we're told, aren't we? But good quality carbohydrate. I know it's a complex carbohydrate. And it's not meant to be that good for you, but I mean the proof's in the pudding. They eat lots of fresh fish, lots of good fatty acids, like in your olive oils and things like that. And just loads of fresh fruit and vegetables. I think if you're eating everything in balance, it's okay having a carbohydrate.
You can get
You can.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's just as long as you're balancing your diet out. They've got a good balanced diet. That's the difference. They don't survive on convenience foods, and they have good quality fresh produce as opposed to the majority of what we eat in the UK is out of a packet, full of preservatives. Not so great. So now I'm going to drain off the pasta. I'm pretty confident that's going to be ready. A little trick I do as well is I'll keep a little bit of my pasta water no matter what I'm using, so there will be a little bit in the bottom of there. There's a bit of seasoning in there, it saves me adding salt again.
So you've done what you've done, you put the sauce?
Yeah.
Not the sauce.
Yeah. And again, that's the reason for that, is I want that spaghetti to absorb that flavour. Yeah, exactly. Right, I'm going to give my meatballs a check. Cool. Right, so like I mentioned earlier on about the basil. So like I said, I'm literally just going to pick whole leaves off. I don't want to be too fancy about it. And just finish it and get that in there. I don't put pepper in everything, but I will put a little bit of pepper in this. That little sort of spicy kick from the black pepper's good. Right, so
To put in perspective, that dish there, just the pasta, you're probably looking about 60 to 70 pence. And that's enough for two people.
Yeah, it's always very colourful. Different textures as well.
and then I'm literally just going to put a few meatballs on top. Just
Actually, there was something that, as soon as they said red kidney beans good for you, they went off the shelves. Aubergines, as soon as they said they're good for you,
Avocado's one at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's going mad for avocado.
I never know what to do with them.
all right, and that's what we're looking at. All right, so it's a real simple dish,
That's the avocado.
Yeah.
nice and hearty.